This podcast is brought to you by Reimagine Radio, the online radio station that aims to give you information on disability and music. My name's Graham Wyman, and I'm the program coordinator with the Vancouver Adapted Music Society. Today I'm joined again by Jim Meyer and Dave Symington, otherwise known as Sticks and Tones. Gentlemen, thank you again for joining me. How are you boys doing?
Thanks, Graham. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you guys. So, jumping right back into it, Jim, since 2000 when you were playing the stick seriously, you have since released 2 records, Watercolor, a solo project, and Arbutus and Jade, an album where you played with an accompanying drummer. How did you approach both records, and how did the writing process differ?
Well, the first disc was Arbutus and Jade, and I think probably like a lot of solo artists, that took a lifetime to create. And thinking about the stick, I guess really from the time I first purchased a used stick and started noodling with it, one of my approaches to learning the instrument was to compose on it. So from the very beginning, I was trying to write, initially maybe little bass riffs and then something to accompany it. But composing was my way into the instrument instead of, just playing exercises all day. That just never really worked on it, but it didn't work for me. Mm-hmm. So, after a few years, some of these little bits and pieces kind of come together, and as my proficiency slowly got a little better, I could do things that I couldn't do before. And that first album, Arbutus and Jade, is a collection of tunes that were really written over almost a 10-year period. Yeah, probably 8 years at least. Some of them took a long time to get together. Some of them were kind of done a few years ago and then kind of revamped a little bit. Mm-hmm. And then two tunes on the album were written almost at the last minute before recording. So I had gotten to the point where I could play the instrument, and I had worked out these. There was 11 tunes on the first album. I had 11 tunes that I could kind of get through. And I started thinking about making an album, and really my only live performances at that time was at stick gatherings. So stick seminars in various places, certainly here in Vancouver, which is a hub for stick things. Mm-hmm. So it's like an open mic night. Maybe on a Friday night you get 2 songs or 3 songs or something. Right. So it was I didn't have a ton of experience, but I thought, all right, I want to go for it. Mm-hmm. And I was starting to record everything just before a stick seminar happened here in May one year, and I'm in charge of that seminar. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to find a drummer that could play with the professional stick players that were coming. Mm-hmm. And that's when I connected with Mike McKelko, that I think both of you guys have at least met before, but Mike's the drummer on that album. And he came out and played with all the stick players at the stick show, and he really enjoyed playing with the stick players, and he played competently, I'll say. Mike's really a pretty good drummer. And I thought, well, okay, what would these songs sound like with drums added? Mm-hmm. So I convinced Mike exactly the same way that Dave approached me. I approached Mike. And I said, I got these tunes, and I'm thinking maybe it'd be fun to record with a drummer. What do you think? And we just had exactly like Dave, our musical background overlapped so much that it wasn't really a big challenge. It was just a matter of rehearsing a bit, but like the vibe was there right away. Yep. So Mike was good enough to write out drum parts for all of my tunes. Okay. Some of the tunes have drum kit and hand percussion. And I should mention Boris, who mixed the album, gets an egg credit. So there's one tune where you'll hear an egg shaking, and that was the mixing engineer. But it felt like the tunes that I had written, it just seemed like drums was the right thing to add. Right. So Arbutus and Jade sort of came together, meeting a drummer with the right sensibility to tackle the tunes, and really taking the time to write out drum parts, which I could never have done. I don't think I could do that now, but absolutely I could not have done that then. So that was great, and I'm still really pleased with the way that album sounds and the way the pieces came together. So I guess we did something right. Yeah. So then the second album, I was thinking 2 things. One, I have to mention, I've had a lot of great stick teachers over the years, and I should probably name them all. But the first one, and the one that I've spent the most time with, is Greg Howard. Okay. And Greg released an album called Stick Figures that's solo Chapman stick, and not just solo Chapman stick. Greg is really into improvising too. So they're all original tunes. They're all done in one take with no overdubs.
Oh, wow.
And in talking to Greg about this album, it's like, other people have done this, but on the stick, it's a real trick. But he just recorded all of the tunes over and over and over until he had a take where the tempo was right, the feel was right, the improv was right, everything came together. Well, that was the first Stick album that I heard cover to cover. So that was this is what Stick albums sound like. And, to this day, that's still a landmark recording in the Stick community because what Greg did on that album is just phenomenal. The playing is just amazing and the variety of tunes. It's all instrumental with a little bit of a jazz kind of feel to it, but it does cover a bit of ground. And it's just a watermark that most of us will never achieve. But it stuck in my head that I should do a solo album with no overdubs and, no edits and all this kind of stuff. And I was playing solo at the time. I was busking then. So I was playing solo. And when you're busking in public, the prog tunes probably aren't the most popular among people who are just tourists who are walking by. So I kind of got into a little bit mellower mode. And the second album is definitely, there's a couple of upbeat tunes in it for sure, but on average, it's definitely more relaxing, more dinner music-y than the first one. Right. And that really was intentional. And I would say I did not accomplish what Greg Howard did, but all of those tunes are basically, there are no overdubs anywhere in the album.
Okay.
The effects are limited to delay and reverb.
Right.
And it is like bare bones. For me and my playing, if you want to hear what the Chapman Stick sounds like, I think Watercolor is a good album for that because it's just Chapman Stick. So I really wanted to do something that was more bare bones, like it's just me. And even the first album, I felt like every tune that's on that album, I have to be able to play it live or I'm not going to put it on the album. So the second one, I thought the same thing. Okay, now what can I truly play solo and still have the melodies come out in that? So yeah, for me, there is a contrast between the two. What can the Stick do in a band setting, which was a duo for the most part, but there was another fellow that added some keyboard tracks, I think on 3 or 4 of those. So there's a few tracks that really do sound like a band. Okay. And then Watercolor is, okay, what if I relax a bit and just play solo? Right. So that's my two. And now because you asked me that, I have to say that the third CD, which is I'm working on now, and the 11s tune is going to be part of that. Yeah. This one has to be different too. And what I'm thinking is I've been so wrapped up in being able to play everything. Yeah, both of my recordings are just me playing, and that's what it is. Yeah. I don't care about that on this one. I don't want the music to be limited by what I can physically play. So I'm starting to write a little more with the keyboard and getting out the bass guitar and even strumming on the acoustic and that, and using the computer software to, I want to be able to play all the parts, but I'm not concerned that I can play all the parts simultaneously. So if instead of left hand and right hand, maybe it ends up being 3 or 4 layers of notes, or maybe even 5, and then drums with that. Well, we'll see what happens. Check in a year or bit. By the end of 2021 is my goal. But I really do want to do a more arranged or layered album this time.
So just for our listeners, where can they find your first few records?
Okay, that's pretty tricky, but I would say jimmeyer.ca/ and I'm just going to put video there because that'll get you to a page that has a video of Dave and I playing, a video of me and another drummer, and a couple of videos of me playing solo. Yeah. So that's the place to look, and if you like what you look, there's contact information on there. And my store website came down at the beginning of the pandemic, and I'm in the process of reworking it. So hopefully by Christmas that'll be up and running again. But anybody that contacts me directly via email, I'm happy to ship something out to you.
Okay, great.
But jimmeyer.ca/video will give you a couple of samples. I think there's 1 or 2 tunes from each album on there, so you'll hear a variety.
Gotcha. So last session that we had, you guys talked about meeting at Granville Island and Dave approaching you to jam. But do you guys remember that first session and what that was like?
I have to throw out first, I remember vividly exactly where I was playing on Granville Island when Dave approached me. So that's really the thing I remember. I think I do have a vague memory of the first time I peeked into the old version of the VAMS studio.
Right.
And I thought, man, this is a pretty cool space these guys have. And I guess what I remember was Dave, how hard Dave worked, because, you know, I wrote the songs and I recorded them years before I met Dave. Mm-hmm. So when Dave and I met, I mean, I could play these tunes, you know, with blindfolded basically. So the rehearsal, with all the pressure was on Dave. I wasn't learning anything. I was just kind of there to help Dave learn. And I know the amount of time Dave spent at home with the play along thing to be able to play these tunes. I just so much appreciate that, because like I was saying last week, it's so fun to play as a duo. And that required Dave to do all the homework. I was ready to go, so Dave just had to work to make it come out, and it's just been really fun.
Well, Dave never shies away from work. That's one thing I've learned.
No, I was expecting a check at the end of it all. That
well, it's not over yet.
No, it's funny because I thought, as I said, I think at the last session we had, that I remember, I'm sure we talked a bit before that, but I remember you telling or asking me to play something in sevens. And I thought, oh, this probably is our first and last time together. I really, you know, it crossed my mind that, you know, sorry. No. No, there's the interlude.
I know, right? Every time.
Go to commercial.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I thought I felt kind of discouraged with myself, because I didn't really want to blow it, in a sense. Like, I knew I wanted to be able to do this. And so, yeah, I think equally I really appreciated Jim's patience. I knew it wasn't going to happen in one session. I had to work at this. And so, yeah, he was right. I would spend time in front of my computer playing on my chair, just trying to get a sense of, like, where these breaks were, where the time signatures changed, you know, what were the sort of clues in the song that I could mark, you know, that it would become more, it was sort of like when I did a play. I did a solo play once, and I had to learn the dialogue, which was an hour and 15 minutes. It reminded me of that experience of, there are certain clues in the script that you sort of mark in your own memory that sort of trigger the next movement or the next sequence of the story or whatever it is. But because I didn't know anything about acting or learning dialogue, and I was taught there is a method in that, you know. You don't just like remember from the first word to the last word, you remember the stories. Right. So you section things up. And it's like that with a lot of Jim's tunes, because there's different sections, there's different feelings, there's different things being expressed, you know. And I think one of the things I struggled with was dynamics as well as timing. But dynamics were, and still are, sometimes challenging, and maybe more so playing electronics, because it's hard to play soft sometimes, because there's a certain trigger point that, you know, I usually have it on maximum sensitivity. So, you know, if you don't have to hit it very hard to make a noise, but it always starts at a certain volume, though. Like, you can't go less than the volume that you trigger. So, but I think that was an interesting experience too, because, you know, I think like on Waves, you know, where there's a lot of dynamics, like a lot of, you know, play soft, you know, I always see Jim looking at me like, you know, down. And to sort of get that and really appreciate that's important, you know. So anyway, it was quite a large learning curve for me, but obviously we enjoyed each other's company. We had a lot in common, like musically and otherwise, and so there was more than just the music. There was more than that. There was more reasons than that to keep going at it. You know?
One thing I was thinking of that just made it extra challenging for you, I'm sure, is, you know, when I sit in with you guys,
Mm-hmm.
what I usually do if it's something I'm not familiar with is if Graham's playing bass, I'll look at what Graham's doing, especially on the low bass string, or somebody's playing guitar, I'll look at the low guitar string, or if there's a keyboard player, maybe I'll look at what their left pinky is doing as a guide for me as a bass player or whatever to know what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
When all you have in the room is a Chapman stick player, none of that helps. If you look at my fingers, you have no idea what note I'm playing because you don't have a reference point for it. So I was just realizing as you were talking, it really was all up to you. That other than me being there and playing my part, there was nothing else I could do. You know, you can't look at what I'm doing and make sense out of it because it's such an unusual instrument. And I'm just really glad that you shouldered all of that burden.
Yeah, I guess.
You know, you're talking about me hanging in there. You're the one that hang in there.
No, but I think, I mean, you obviously would feed me cues, you know, physically or otherwise sometimes.
Usually after the fact. Way to screw up there.
Yeah. Yeah, remember that. I think you actually sent me some notes at one point on an email or something just to, but I think, yeah, no, it just worked. I think it was obvious fairly that we had something that we could do here, and you know, and eventually we played quite a number of gigs, which we want to get back to as soon as possible.
I've played more gigs with you than anybody else for sure.
So yeah, and
well, the other thing I wanted to say too about when we first got together, yeah, it's a challenge for you to right away start playing songs that I wrote, but when we were just sort of jamming and noodling around, I could tell that you could play. I mean, that was really all I was listening for is, okay, is this a nice guy or is this a drummer? And, you know, any musician knows that. Within 30 seconds is like, oh, okay, Dave's a drummer. You know, and then I think I knew from that minute it's just a matter of how long is it going to take to learn the tunes. I never really felt like, oh, this is insurmountable. It's like, oh, I'm playing with a drummer again. This is awesome.
Oh, that's nice to hear.
Yeah. Well,
that's cool.
And tagging on with that, like, and Jim, you'll probably agree, but I've played with a bunch of drummers before, but Dave's time and meter is so consistent.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
That's one thing.
And, you know, it's like Dave's not the only drummer I've played with that's like this, but the important thing is a drummer that listens.
Yes.
Because the minute you play with a drummer that's like heads down, I'm doing my thing, okay, now they're leading the band and everybody else has to follow them, which isn't the way I envision the music. But when I see it, you know, like literally I see Dave's head cocked to one side like he's listening to what I'm playing. It's like, okay, I'm in good shape now. I think I'm in good hands.
Yeah. So
and vice versa.
Yeah, no. So, Jim, in 2015, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was your first VAMS event for the Strong Sessions that you played with the Society. What was that 2015 concert like for the both of you?
That was unbelievable for me. That whole night was just ridiculous. First of all, I think kudos to the stage director and the stage crew at that show, because keeping that show going with that many musicians and that many constraints about who goes where, I mean, that was phenomenal. And I'm also glad we were relatively early. I don't think we were first, but I think I know we were early, and I was glad that I could like just chill and watch the rest of the show. I really enjoyed that. But Dave and I'm trying to remember, Dave, how many rehearsals that we had? I guess enough, but that was a 20-minute set, so enough to learn 20 minutes of music. But that was our first, let's go play in front of people. And as you remember, that was a packed house. Yeah. So to walk out on stage, and you know, I play on stage, but that was a really nice room for me. There was, I don't know, 300 people in the room, and you know, nice stage and good sound and all that. That was mildly intimidating at the time. And if you listen to the video of that, we were playing a little bit fast. And I vividly remember, I think it was Waves, which is the tune in sevenths that Dave keeps talking about. And we're approaching the solo for me, and I'm thinking, wow, this is pretty fast. I wonder if I can play it that fast, you know. But there was a ton of adrenaline. The crowd went nuts. I also in Waves toward the end, I play sort of a rhythm part, and Dave moves around the kit and like gets a little bit of a drum solo. And I remember while he was doing that, I walked up to the mic and said, "Dave Symington," and the roar that came back at me was just so invigorating, man. The crowd was so into it. That was a super fun gig for sure.
That was cool.
Hanging out with all the guys, the Simon and Jim Burns, and all the guys were there in the green room. That was just really fun hanging out at the show.
Yeah, it was cool. I look at it now and I think, I think we're a little more polished than that now. But considering it was our first gig, and I mean, I was nervous, you were nervous. There was a lot going on, a lot of distractions, but I think we just kind of once the music started, we just got focused, and I was not as distracted as I thought I would be playing, and it was just really cool to deliver something that was quite unique that we hadn't really done in VAMS before. This kind of fusionist. I mean, with Rolf,
right.
We normally the time signatures were pretty straightforward though, so this was quite a different thing to deliver, and it was a lot of fun. And I think that night I played with 4 different groups of people or something, so it was...
That's not surprising.
I think we were first.
Maybe we were first. Yeah, that does seem right.
Yeah, I just thought it was a super cool way to open that show, and it got a lot of, and since then, it was obviously a big reward for all the time we'd spent. I don't know how long, 6 or 7 months maybe leading up to that.
Oh, wow.
I don't remember that exactly, but yeah, we had rehearsed quite a bit before that.
Yeah.
And just for our listeners, if you want to check out the video, it's actually under Jim Meyer and Dave Symington Strong Sessions. So if you check that out, you can either find it on the Disability Foundation YouTube site or just type that in.
And you can play along in 7s.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Get that egg shaker out.
For those at home.
So since that event, Jim, you've supported VAMS as well as other disabled organizations around the Lower Mainland. What keeps you coming back and participating in different events?
I've thought about this over the years, but it's a combination of the people and the experience, because playing with Dave is just a ton of fun, and it always has been in the rehearsal studio.
Yeah.
But then to go play live, I mean, that's just orders of magnitude way more fun. Yeah, that first gig was ridiculous, but Dave and I have done a lot of corporate things and some stuff with you guys too, and it's just really fun to play. But as I think about it, I have to mention Sexy Voices.
Right.
I think Sexy Voices is one of the coolest things I have ever been a part of. And I'm just being in the pit. Can you be an orchestra if there's only a few of us?
Yeah.
The pit band, whatever. Man, we had like front row seats to the I remember the dress rehearsal and all 3 of the performances. I was so moved by everybody's story and everybody's performance, and it just seems like every time I engage in something with the VAMS group, I come away on cloud 9 thinking it's just such an amazing group of artists and everything. Well, then the folks behind the scenes that make the shows happen, and I just think it's an amazing group of people. So that's what you should do in your life: hang out with amazing people.
Wow. Yeah. No, if only life was
that
that
easy. Bit of
easy.
music and
But seriously, I don't know how you feel about that, Dave. But that Sexy Voices show, I mean, I thought what we did was great, but watching that show, being a part of it, that just moved me so much. That was such an amazing week.
Yeah, that was very cool. I think the lead up to it, I mean, there was a lot of work that went into that too, a lot of changes, a lot of things we had to sort of do on the fly, and we were playing with Kurt, and yeah, so it was because you were playing more bass in that show, right?
I was, but we had to play a couple of those, that sort of stripper tune. I forget what it is. I think I was playing melody on that, but yeah, I was sort of the bass player with the occasional let's add a guitar riff here and there. Yeah.
And there were some challenging like stops and accents at Brad.
Well, to coordinate with the actors, that was a new challenge. So
Yeah, I thought that was a lot of fun. I also thought that time we played for David Roche
Oh
and
yeah,
was
when the film
I
came
mean,
out.
pretty much any show you could sort of look at. I mean, I don't know that we've had any duds. I mean, we've done some outside stuff. We played at Douglas Park for,
Mm-hmm.
what was that for? For the seniors tea.
I think that plumbers convention we did out in the Home Depot parking lot in Chilliwack, I think that one was not the best.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
went down the drain, so to speak.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
How many puns could you come up with that softball being let up?
Well, I mean, that is the other thing when Dave and I rehearse. It's like I will say, we are both pretty serious in rehearsal while we're playing. And then we're like grade fives in between songs. I think we both have this regenerative sense of humor that any grade school, middle school boy can appreciate. So it's nice to have like really serious of like, we're trying to play as well as we can. But also during a rehearsal, there's plenty of time to blow off steam and just kick back, and
Yeah.
Right.
it makes it really nice. I don't think I could do 2 hours of head down, everything serious like every moment. So it's a joy to rehearse too. So that makes it good.
Yeah, that,
So tagging on to rehearsals.
and
Big
fake
bars, absolutely. Yeah.
So tagging on to rehearsals, you two were a part of our virtual concert series at Carousel Theaters. What was that like, playing for the first time in 7 months?
I'm really glad that you scheduled a rehearsal day 2 days before the recording day,
Yeah.
because I think the recording day went fine. I mean, I remember the first half hour of the recording day was pretty rough, but I think then we found our rhythm. It was good. But boy, that rehearsal day, yeah, I was pretty rusty, and it just, I had been playing, but playing together changes everything.
Mm-hmm.
As you've mentioned before, now I have to play at a constant tempo. I wasn't used to that, and yeah, just, where all the changes are and the breaks and that,
Right.
that's the reason you rehearse, is to have those all kind of ready to go. And
Mm-hmm.
I would say that rehearsal day before the video was, oh yeah, I remember all the spots we have to work on. But it worked out great. I think we just needed to run through everything twice, and
Yeah.
then we were ready to go. So all those other rehearsals paid off.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit surreal, the whole thing. I mean, during the pandemic, and we're in this, I think I went in there with some anxiety just about being in a closed space
Yeah.
with other people, but my desire to play sort of overwrote all of those kind of, barriers that I felt, and ultimately felt very safe there. And I think it just kind of reminded me how much, how important music is to me, and how important the community of musicians is to me, and just the different relationships we have as different people, but also as different musical sort of perspectives. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a very different relationship with each person you play with, because the styles are all different and the feels are different. And so I love that opportunity, not just to play with Jim, but just to be there. And I guess there was 3 other groupings that I played with. And but yeah, Jim and I, it's the only duo that I play in. Jim, are you in any other duos that I should be aware of? Other than marriage?
Well, one of my grandsons, I'm teaching him a little guitar, so one day maybe we'll have a duo. But
All right, yeah. No, I mean, of course, now it's, a month or 5 weeks later, whatever it is, it's, we haven't played since then. We got to I want to find a way to get back to it. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm itching for the opportunity.
Yeah, no, I think we all can't wait till, there's a little bit more, and, life goes back to being a little bit more normal.
Yeah.
So to finish off with today's session, Jim, the song that's going to take us out today is called Downshift 405. Would you mind just giving a little bit of background to our listeners about the piece before we play it?
Sure. On this album, Arbutus and Jade, this is one of the tunes that was written kind of right at the end, and I had recorded a number of the pieces, and I just felt like I needed something to rock out. Yeah. And that's what came out of it. It's for any bass player, it just starts with a repeated bass note for about 16 bars. So that kind of lays down the 4 on the floor sort of thing. So it's sort of rocking in the beginning, and then the end part is we get to go in a different time signature. So it's 5/4 at the end. And that sort of has a part of the name that this is important to listen to. There's a guest artist on that track. It's the only track I really have a guest artist on, and it's a fellow named Schiff, who just a phenomenal musician. He's the only musician I know that played with Elvis. Actually, Don was one of the house bass player at 2 casinos in Vegas.
Okay. During
the last sort of run of Elvis there. So he played in the pit behind Elvis, I think, for 3 or 4 months, and. But a phenomenal bass player, one of the very first Chapman stick players, and he's added anything you hear on that track that sounds like a solo, especially at the end. That's Schiff, playing a variety of tapping instruments and bowing instruments and whatever he had lying around. Right. So yeah, that's good variety on that too. But I can't take credit for the fun stuff. That's all done.
Well, no. Well, thank you both again for joining me. This has been a pleasure. And for our listeners, this is Downshift 405 again. And everyone stay safe out there and keep that music flowing. Take care.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.